Thanks for staying. Welcome back. Now, Ghana may not be able to meet the revenue targets for this year unless some reforms are carried out on tax issues. Now, that's coming from governance expert Dr. Eric Oduosai, who says tax expenditures alone amounted to 5.2% of the nation's GDP in 2017. Speaking to Joy Business, Dr. Oduosai called for reforms to enhance the revenue generation.
For us to meet it, unless we review our tax incentive regime, both the legal and administrative regime, including enforcement, because it is very clear that the beneficiaries are benefiting, but the society or the country is not benefiting as expected. So I think if we don't review the incentive regime, it is going to affect us. Most importantly, the various mining and minerals agreements that we sign as a country, where we have stability clauses in there, takes all these incentive organizations outside the current legal regime. So it makes it difficult again for us to be able to mobilize it. So I will advocate that if we can pass what we call an Unconscionable Contracts Review Amendment Act, a law that sought to give the government the opportunity to review all such minerals and mining agreements or contracts, that seems to be very unconscionable.
Now, come end of September, the tax amnesty granted defaulting businesses and individuals will expire. Government therefore wants defaulting income earners, both registered and unregistered with GRA, to take advantage and regularize their tax statuses. The Ghana Revenue Authority is undertaking nationwide public education on the new policy and the general tax regime. At one of such sessions in Kumasi, officials warned they will come hard at defiant taxpayers after the amnesty period elapses. Prince Apia has more.
The tax amnesty policy, launched last year, is an initiative by the Ghana Revenue Authority to get all defaulting individuals and companies to file for tax without a penalty. The Ghana Revenue Act gives an opportunity for the state to grant such relief to citizens and businesses as and when it becomes necessary. GRA says it is expecting to rake in over 300 million Ghana cedis from the policy currently in force. Chief Revenue Officer at the Doomed Taxpayer Office, Isaac Quay, emphasized the point at the Kumasi Tax Education Forum.
This is grace, abundant grace. You have defaulted in submitting your returns, and each return attracts a penalty of 500 Ghana cedis for the day, the first day of default, and 10 cedis for each extra day. So if from 2014 you have not submitted your returns, add 500 and all the 10s every day till now. If you have never filed any return, you have not even registered, this is why tax amnesty is in, to allow you, the taxpayer who has never filed, registered with us, to now register and file your return for free. We are talking about one, those who have never registered with us, they are not in our books. Register, bring your returns, and go scot-free. For those who have registered with us and are paying and are submitting their returns, those that you have defaulted, which you fear to bring because of the penalties that will come, all the penalties will be forgiven. So this is the best news.
Mr. Quay also warned they will come hard at defiant taxpayers after the amnesty period elapses.
Only up to 30th of August to apply. But mind you, we are operating a system, Total Revenue Integrated Processing System. We simply call it TRIPS. If you don't file your return on time, I am not going to penalize you. It's the machine which tells you that, yes, you have to file by this time. If you don't file, the penalty is automatic. If you don't pay your tax on time, the interest is automatic because it's on the machine. So this is the time for us to correct our ills and go forward.
The tax education also touched on the VAT flat rate system, warehousing taxes, and other new aspects of the tax regime. Edward Agufin is Principal Revenue Officer.
You see that most of those warehouse keepers or wholesalers, they are mainly foreign people. We want more Ghanaians to also get on board. So we educated them that these facilities are available for you. So you to get on board.
Meanwhile, officials of the Ghana Revenue Authority say they will continue undertaking the nationwide public education on the new policy and general tax regimes. Prince Apia reporting.
Let's move away from taxation issues now. And the Bank of Ghana says it has put in place adequate measures to deal with the negative effects of the recent banking issues. The action has resulted in some panic withdrawals, which has affected most of the local banks as well as the savings and loans companies. Head of Banking Supervision, or AJC, tells Joy Business some of these actions that have already been instituted would help minimize the expected shocks.
In these decisions, we do all these analyses. If this bank should go down, how is it going to impact on the savings and loans? Because the savings and loans also have deposits with these banks. So we take all these things into consideration.
And the corrective measures have been put in place.
Certainly.
So
yeah.
the few runs that we've seen on these institutions are being addressed.
We have come out to say that. We have come out to say that all depositors will get access to their deposits, rights. All depositors will get access to their deposits. So we have put in place enough measures to ensure that we minimize the ripple effects of the failure of these banks on the other sectors of the economy, especially the savings and loans and the finance houses. I get that. We know some of the finance houses and savings and loans have challenges, and we are working on those challenges. At the appropriate time, I think whatever we are doing will be made known to the stakeholders.
If the need be.
When we get there, we'll cross. When we get there, we'll cross. So far, we haven't given liquidity support to any savings and loans.
But they are claiming that some of them are claiming that they need support, and that's why they are going through those problems.
They need support from the central bank.
Yes, please.
As far as I'm concerned, I haven't received any application from a savings and loan that they need support. I haven't received any application.
So why them having challenges even sometimes to pay 100 Ghana cedis deposit?
That should inform you why we are taking some of these decisions.
Now, financial analyst Dr. Daniel Sedo has stated that there are still some issues arising out of the decision by the central bank to revoke the licenses of some 7 banks in the country. Dr. Sedo told Joy Business in-house analyst Philip Namfuri the challenges may go on for some time as banks play a critical role in the functioning of the economy.
So, Doc, beyond staff, beyond depositors, we are picking up information, Joy Business, that service providers also are being hit. Bullion vans, security services, and the likes may be hit. Give us a sense of how far and wide this banking crisis is going, because it seems the discussion has been focusing on shareholders, board, staff, etc. Now we see that it's going beyond. Give us your thoughts on this, please.
Thank you very much. The issue is very simple if you understand it. There are ramifications. The decision that has been taken by the central bank is a major one. The quantum we know, and it's still going up. But these other consequential issues are far-reaching. We're talking about people being laid off. But if you look at the banks affect so many other areas in our lives. Take it from the lowest angle. That wache seller who is at the corner of the bank that staff go and buy from would be out of business. If there are other service providers to banks, no doubt. Most of those people will be out of business because you had 5 banks, now it's 1. And there's closeness of proximity of branches, so some of those branches will be closed down. Staff will be laid off. So whom are you providing the services for? In my view, there are lessons that we need to learn from these things. Because, like I keep saying, it happened 30 years ago, we didn't learn. Now it is happening. So we need to pay attention to the consequential effects. It's deeper than we are all thinking. It will drag on for a while. It's not going to go away in one day, in 1 month. You can hear everybody talking about it. It would affect schools because ability to pay school fees will go down. It would affect the purchasing of insurance because people will not have disposable income. So it would even affect tithes, if we want to stretch it, because people do not have the money any longer. So it's a real issue. It's a life-threatening issue. And so we should be looking for quick solution to re-establish the equilibrium that we have lost.
Right, so that was financial analyst Dr. Daniel Sedo. Will be coming to him. But before then, my colleague Philip Namfuri is here with me to get some more understanding about what Dr. Daniel said. So beyond that, what else did he mean? What exactly does he mean?
Okay, so Emmanuel, apart from the staff of the banks that have been affected, you look at those who are providing services to these banks. We look at people like internet service providers, bullion van drivers, bullion vans themselves, security services, even catering. You know, banks undertake a lot of activities. So sometimes even their buildings they rent for their operations and stuff like that. If the new bank, consolidated bank, doesn't want these services or wants to change these service providers, then obviously the people who are providing these services will lose out on business. And you know the concomitant effects this will bring. It can shift to their revenues, if there have to be some possible layoffs. And so it's not only from the point of staff of the banks or depositors, it goes beyond. And like he said, banking is central to the economy.
Exactly.
And it affects so many areas. And with only this in view, you can see that the tentacles of the banking crisis have spread far beyond.
Now let's see about let's get to know whether it will have any effect on GDP itself of the economy.
Okay, because of the slowdown in the banking sector itself, and the banking sector is part of the services sector of the economy, which also adds to GDP. There's a slowdown there. Apart from that, if the quantum of these service providers and other people is weighty enough, then it's also going to affect the services sector, which will affect GDP calculation eventually.
All right, now, so Dr. Sedo has also been sharing his thoughts on the right structures in place to bring our banking sector back on its feet, as well as pursuing productive ventures which will put resources to good use. Let's see what he's saying. All right, so we seem to be having some small challenge with the file there. But what exactly has Dr. Sedo been saying about the structures that we need to put in place to ensure the banking sector is returned to a sound footing?
Okay, so he started off by saying that our banking sector was at an equilibrium at first. Because of the changes, there has been some disequilibrium. Over a course of time, we'll be coming back to this equilibrium. And that's why we're seeing all these casualties in the banking sector. So over time, we will see that the banking sector will be put on the right footing. Also, he says the funds that were given out as loans and stuff like that, we should put in more efforts to recover them and plug in the loopholes that the consolidated bank has. Because he says the 5.7 billion bond is a paper. It's not really going to immediately plug the revenue loopholes or the liquidity loopholes in the bank, I beg your pardon. So we should put in more efforts to rope in these funds to plug that loophole in the banks.
All right, so he's also talking about streamlining the whole financial sector. What exactly did he mean?
Okay, so he says we have the financial system, different parts of it. We have the banks, we have the insurance, we have the pensions, and we have the capital market. Now, he's looking forward to a time when all the four parts of the financial system come together so that there will be better control. Because if you look at what's happening or what has happened in the crisis, banks are operating in other space. They have other subsidiaries. And these subsidiaries are not or do not fall under the regulatory arm of the Bank of Ghana. So whilst the Bank of Ghana regulates these banks, there are other parts, like maybe a bank has an investment wing or has an affiliation to an investment company. Then these other regulators, for example, the National Insurance Commission, the National Pensions and Regulatory Authority, as well as the Securities and Exchange Commission, have to all come together, these four regulators in Ghana, financial services regulators, to make sure that it's put on the right footing.
All right. Thank you very much for that update. Philip Namfuri is the in-house analyst with Joy Business. Now, there are persistent calls on government to channel the District Assembly's Common Fund through rural and community banks. Advocates include board chairman of the Menfi Rural Bank, Dr. Tony Obin. He believes rural and community banks are better placed to use the money because they deal directly with the local people. Dr. Obin says it is necessary as the Bank of Ghana impresses upon local banks to meet the minimum capital requirement. He's been telling Prince Appiah.
I think it makes a lot of sense, financial sense. It also helps boost the rural bank, especially the ones that are strong and have potential to grow. And for me, it's fair that when you go to some of these communities, especially where you don't have a commercial bank, for example, and you have the #1 rural bank in this country, which is very strong, and you still say that the monies that are supposed to affect the people in that area must be kept outside. In any case, whenever the district assemblies need money, they don't go to Accra to the commercial banks. They go, and this is not in competition, we are not competing with them, but they go to the rural banks in our case for even these government on lending social facilities like the LEAP and things like that. Sometimes they bring that to us for us to on lend to beneficiaries, and sometimes beneficiaries have difficulties even paying and becomes a challenge to us. So I think it will also provide faith in the rural banks, and I'm sure there's a purpose for which we were set up. We were established to provide the necessary financial intermediation for the rural communities. And so I think it is important for government to do that. We have been saying this for 12 years. Sometimes we get very close to acceptance, for government to accept, and then some things happen. We have carried it to the Association of Rural Banks in Accra, and they seem to be very understanding. And I've heard other rural banks also making similar pronouncements. And I think government will have to sit down and look at it. I'm not saying give it wholesale to every rural bank, but you need to assess the strength of the particular rural bank. And then
we're still live on the marketplace, and we're still staying within the banking space because the Bank of Ghana is set to introduce new set of regulations to help streamline currency trading in the country. The regulations are also expected to help stabilize and arrest the recent sharp depreciation of the local currency. And we will shortly be joined by an economist to explore the success of these regulations. But before then, Norvan Akwa-Hayford is here to give some trend analysis, a year-to-date performance of the cedi against the other currencies. Norvan.
Okay, so today, this morning on Bloomberg, if you check here, you realize that the cedi actually opened trading at 4 cedis, 86 pesos. And if you look at how it has performed over the period in Ghana, you recall that we reported the fact that this morning it opened at 4 cedis 90 pesos. Yesterday it was 4 cedis 91 pesos. And that is one of the reasons why the central bank is considering to, introduce some kind of regulations to arrest the depreciating cedi that we have in this country. And Abuaje, you see, one of the interesting things is that what the Bank of Ghana want to do, we've seen it before under Governor Wampa. Exactly. The same thing was done when the cedi was depreciating rapidly, and we don't know what kind of regulation they'll be introducing this time and what the effect would be, because during the time of Governor Wampa, when the introduction of these kind of regulations, forex regulations, was done, it did not solve the situation. It rather saw the cedi depreciating even more faster than you can think of, which then pushed the central bank to withdraw these measures. We're wondering what Addison will be doing this time around.
So before you go on, how has the trend, the declining trend or the depreciation trend of the cedi been like year to date?
Well, if you were looking at year to date, what you will see is that if you look at the trend on the board here, this is 1 year on. This is how the trend looks like. You've seen the cedi move from below 4 cedis and currently hit the 4 cedis 87 pesos that we are seeing now on Bloomberg Terminal. And this is what you're seeing. And if you want to even look at the 1 month and how the performance has been in the month of August, this is how it also looks like for you. So from the beginning of the month to today, I mean, this is what it also looks like, the trend, how the cedi has performed.
All right, so let's get on the phone lines now, speak with economist Courage Marty. I'll get back to you, Norvan. But before then, Courage, if you're listening to us, good afternoon, welcome to the marketplace.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
Now, do you think regulation can correct the problem of the depreciation of the cedi?
Well, so regulation is necessary, but it is not sufficient or the panacea to the fundamental problem faced by the cedi. And let us also not confuse it with administrative control of the FX market, because the market forces do not tolerate administrative control as we saw in 2014. And I believe that the current regime will be mindful of that and steer clear of administrative control of the FX market. What is important is to look at the laws governing trading, pricing of FX on the market. And I think that there are some laws that regulate how FX are brought in, how they are traded. For instance, during periods of depreciation, you tend to see some of the traders short selling the currency, and that can trigger a faster rate of depreciation than necessary. And so you require the regulator to step in at those particular moments to ensure that speculation and short selling of the currency is minimized to the barest level, so that we can have a certain trajectory of depreciation that is consistent with fundamentals. But as far as fundamental causes are concerned, it goes beyond just one arm of the regulation.
All right, so if you're talking about other players, to what extent are their actions, impeding the smooth performance of the currency?
For me, I believe that this short-term exchange rate management cannot compensate or substitute for the need to reform the economic environment and reform the policy environment. So you cannot use short-term exchange rate management, short-term pumping of reserves and borrowing foreign currency to supply the market. These are short-term measures that cannot substitute for the need to reform the economy. And so extending into the realm of fiscal policy, where it is necessary for the government to implement policies that improve, on one, productivity of the local enterprise, two, competitiveness of the local enterprise, and present this high competitiveness on the foreign market and end foreign exchange to supply on the market. Now, for as long as these situations are not tackled, you can only regulate the trading, but you need supply to be traded. So we need to tackle the fundamental causes of constraints to supply as well.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Courage Marty, an economist with Data Bank. Now, Norvan, we're coming back to you. So what will be the impact of this particular regulation that the Bank of Ghana wants to introduce on the markets?
Of course, Aboje, if you look at these kind of regulations, we don't know for now what kind of regulation and how new that will be or how different.
But it's a control measure, sort of.
Of course, but I mean, if you have supply shortage, or you have dollars in short supply, of course, people are looking for these dollars. And remember, a lot of things are happening within this very small economy that we have. The banking situation is one of the reasons that people may be changing, they may be changing their cedis into dollars, because you know that there have been some panic withdrawals here and there. You have an economy that is import dependent. And one of the things that needs to be done is for us to move away from the import dependency to an economy that we would export and will begin to, use more of the things that we produce here. And that's one of the solutions that we need to look at. And just as Courage Marty did indicate to you, you cannot use this as a long-term measure. It will be a problem. It can be short, but you should not also consider only.
Thank you very much, Norvan Apa, is Assistant Business News Editor. Now, Wednesday, Nigeria's central bank ordered 4 banks to refund $8.134 billion that MTN illegally sent out of the country in breach of foreign exchange regulations. The Central Bank of Nigeria has also fined the banks, it said on its official Twitter account, although the fines are small compared to the demanded refund. The report by Reuters indicates Standard Chartered was fined 2.4 billion naira, Stanbic IBTC 1.8 billion naira, Citibank 1.2 billion naira, and Diamond Bank 250 million naira. We'll do some more interesting analysis in the subsequent bulletins. That's it for the marketplace today. My name is Emmanuel Apwaji. We are free. Have a good afternoon.